Yet another person comes out talking about the potential risks and benefits of AI. That person is Dario Amodei, the founder and CEO of Anthropic, one of the biggest competitors to OpenAI and ChatGPT. He wrote a powerful essay called Machines of Loving Grace that's creating a bit of a stir in the industry, how AI can transform the world for the better. In this video, let's take a look at what this essay says, because keep in mind, he's one of a handful of people that are extremely close to the AI development, the development of the frontier models, the most capable AI systems. So his educated guess, if you will probably be one of the world's best, because of how close he is to the cutting-edge AI progress. Now, in the past, he talked a lot about the risks of powerful AI. He was very concerned, and a lot of people saw Anthropic, his company, as maybe being safer than OpenAI, him as being the safer person to steward this powerful technology into the world. As he's saying here, sometimes people draw the conclusion that he's a pessimist or doomer who thinks AI will be mostly bad or dangerous. He does not think that at all. He thinks most people are underestimating how radical the upside of AI could be, just as most people are underestimating how bad the risks could be. In this essay, he's going to talk about what happens if everything goes right. How good will life be if we get it right? The categories he is most excited about when it comes to powerful AI are biology and physical health, neuroscience and mental health, economic development and poverty, peace and governance, and work and meaning. And we start by looking at some basic assumptions and frameworks. First, he wants to define what he means by powerful AI, and he dislikes the term AGI, artificial general intelligence, but he believes that can come as early as 2026. But whether that happens in 2026 or not, what happens in the 5-10 years after that? So if AGI rolls around next year, what will the world look like in 2030 to 2035? So his idea of a powerful AI, it might be similar to an LLM, a large language model, or it could have a completely different architecture, but it will have the following properties. In terms of pure intelligence, it's smarter than a Nobel Prize winner across most relevant fields: biology, programming, math, engineering, writing, etc. It can prove unsolved mathematical problems, write extremely good novels, write difficult code bases from scratch, etc. So notice here, he's not even talking about it being better than the median human, the average human. It's not even in the top 1%. In terms of pure intelligence, it's smarter than a Nobel Prize winner. In addition to being just a smart thing you talk to, it has all the interfaces available to a human working virtually: text, audio, video, mouse and keyboard control, and internet access. So it can replace basically any remote worker. It can engage in any actions, communications, or remote operations enabled by this interface: taking actions on the internet, taking or giving directions to humans, ordering materials, directing experiments, watching videos, making videos, and so on. I wonder what it says about me that I'm okay with it, doing all of this, but when we get to making videos, it's like, wait, stop right there. Not cool, man. And it's going to do all these tasks with, again, a skill exceeding that of the most capable humans in the world. By the way, let me know in the comments if you've had that moment where you realize that an AI could replace you or could soon replace you, whatever it is you do to earn a living, to provide for your family. Did you have that moment yet? How did that feel? Let me know in the comments. Very curious. And this super AI, this powerful AI as he calls it, it does not just passively answer questions. It can be given tasks that take hours, days, or weeks to complete. It goes off and does these tasks autonomously. Again, so this is the idea of an agent that we've been talking about. This is the thing that a lot of people are excited/worried about. And this is that sort of like next level of AI. It goes and plans and does stuff completely on its own. It does not have a physical embodiment, but it can control existing physical tools, robots, or laboratory equipment through a computer. In theory, it could even design robots or equipment for itself to use. This is an interesting idea because we're not saying this robot is a large language model inside a robot. It's not its brain. And I haven't heard this too much, but you can almost think of robots as appendages for a powerful AI. Just like we might use our fingers or hands to move stuff around, this AGI, this powerful AI, 10 or 20 or 30 robots to complete those tasks. That's a bit of a perspective shift, I think. And the resources used to train the model can be repurposed to run millions of instances of it. And this matches projected clusters sizes by 2027. So the amount of compute clusters will have will match this by 2027, and it can absorb information, generate actions at roughly 10 to 100 times human speed. The millions of copies can act independently on unrelated tasks or can all work on the same tasks together to collaborate like humans do. Different subpopulations could be fine-tuned to be especially good at particular tasks. We could summarize this as a country of geniuses in a data center. Clearly, such an entity would be capable of solving very difficult problems very fast, but it is not trivial to figure out how fast. Two extreme positions both seem false to me. Now, on one hand, you have this idea of the singularity, right? So basically, the world would be transformed in a matter of seconds or days, perhaps, as this superintelligence builds on itself and solves every possible scientific, engineering, and operational tasks almost immediately. Now, of course, we have real limits and constraints, such as hardware, conducting biological experiments, etc. Intelligence may be powerful, but it isn't magic fairy dust. And on the flip side of that, you might believe that the technological progress is saturated or rate limited by real-world data or by social factors, and that this superintelligence will add very little. He says this seems equally implausible to me. Certainly, there are some problems where a large group of smart people would drastically speed up process, especially if they aren't limited to analysis and can make things happen in the real world, which our sort of country of geniuses can by directing or assisting teams of humans. So not only would it use robots as potentially as appendages, but also teams of humans. And he thinks the truth is likely to be some messy admixture of these two extreme pictures. It mentions that economists often talk about factors of production, things like labor, land, and capital. The phrase marginal returns to labor, land, capital. This captures the idea that in a given situation, a given factor may or may not be the limiting one. For example, an Air Force needs both planes and pilots. Hiring more pilots doesn't help much if you're out of planes. If you've played games like Factorio or Satisfactory, you know this. One small factor could be the limiting one to massive scale. A bottleneck of a critical material will basically slow down everything else, the entire system, to the rate at which you can produce that material. And he's saying in the AI age, we should be talking about the marginal returns to intelligence and figuring out what the other factors are that are complementary to intelligence and that become limiting factors when intelligence is very high. This is a very interesting thing to think about. We are not used to thinking in this way, to asking how much does being smarter help with this particular task and on what time scale. I gotta say, reading this, this person, Dario Amodei, already has given me a few perspective shifts, a few new ways, new lenses to see where things are going. As he says, this seems like the right way to conceptualize a world with very powerful AI. And here's his guess at a list of factors that limit or that are complementary to intelligence. So first of all, we have the speed of the outside world, right? Our world only moves so fast. Cells and animals run at a fixed speed, so experiments on them take a certain amount of time, which may be irreducible. The same is true of hardware, materials, science, anything involving communicating with people, and even our existing software infrastructure. And of course, in science, you have experiments that need to be performed in sequence, each learning from and building upon the last. So for example, if you wanted to develop a cancer cure, there's probably going to be some minimum that cannot be decreased, right? So even with an infinite intelligence, if you will, there's still going to be a number of experiments that need to be run sequentially in order, each of them taking some time because we're dealing with, well, cells and animals and metabolisms and so forth. Next, we have the need for data. Sometimes the raw data is lacking, and when we have lacking data, more intelligence simply does not help, right? So for example, with particle physicists, they're very ingenious. They have a wide range of theories, but because data is limited, they're not able to choose between them, to choose the correct one, the most likely one. And it's not clear if they could do much better if they were super intelligent. So if they all became a million times smarter, would they be able to overcome the bottleneck of data? We don't think so at this point. Then we have intrinsic complexity. Some things are inherently unpredictable or chaotic to where even the most powerful AI cannot predict or untangle them. Even an incredibly powerful AI could predict only marginally further ahead, above humans or computers we have today, in a chaotic system, such as the three-body problem, which reminds me, I still have yet to see that movie. I hear it's very, very good. And of course, constraints from humans. Of course, many things cannot be done without breaking laws, harming humans, or messing up society. And as he mentioned before, we're strictly talking about aligned AI. If we're talking about an unaligned AI that's willing to do these things, well, we're talking about risks. Here, we're just looking at the upside in case we get everything right. He's saying while there are many societal structures that are inefficient or even harmful, it's hard to rapidly change them. We have people's willingness to change their habits, the behaviors of governments, etc. He's saying impacts of these changes would be substantially reduced by regulations or misplaced fears, including nuclear power, supersonic flight, and even elevators. He links to this article about elevators. This thing reminds me of The Shining. It actually has nothing to do with that. It's New York Times guest essay, The American Elevator Explains Why Housing Costs Have Skyrocketed. So as far as I can tell, this is saying that certain regulations make elevators in North America over-engineered, bespoke, handcrafted, and expensive pieces of equipment that are unaffordable, which makes it harder to build affordable housing. All right, I'll delete the question mark. Boy, was that a strange example to give, but okay. He also mentioned some physical laws that limit how fast progress can take place. He gives 2 examples, such as the speed of light, and also pudding does not unstir. I think whatever points he lost with the elevator example, he made it all back with the pudding not unstirring example. Very good. The next point he's saying here is a lot of these limitations might be over time be reduced by some sort of a super intelligence that might be better at running experiments in vitro in a test tube, maybe creating bigger particle accelerators, etc., and find ways around human-based constraints. The phrase "release the hypno-drones" comes to mind. If you haven't played the wonderful online game Universal Paperclips at decisionproblem.com/paperclips, it's pretty good. One of those idle incremental games, and I think does a very good job of capturing what happens if all of this goes wrong. Basically, in the game, as this ever-improving AI, you're able to bribe humans to do your bidding for you until you develop the technology of hypno-drones, at which point you're able to release the hypno-drones, at which point you no longer have to bribe them to do things for you. I'll just leave it at that. But again, here we're talking about a aligned AI. And he continues, so we should imagine a picture where intelligence is initially heavily bottlenecked, but over time, intelligence itself increases routes around these bottlenecks. So with that in mind, with that framework, let's look at the different sort of areas that he mentioned in the introduction, starting with biology and health. By the way, right around the same time that this got released, Nobel Prize was awarded to Demis Hassabis and some of his teammates on the DeepMind team for the work with AlphaFold. So keep this in mind. Where we're talking about this isn't science fiction. It's happening now. It's happening fast. We're already at a time when the biggest scientific breakthroughs are made on the backs of these neural nets. And he's saying biology is probably the area where scientific progress has the greatest potential to directly and unambiguously improve the quality of human life. But even without curing disease, biological science can improve the baseline quality of human health, increase our healthy lifespan, increase control and freedom over our own biological processes, and addressing everyday problems that we currently think of as immutable parts of the human condition. Can you imagine, for example, never having to use a public toilet ever again because you have superhuman control over your bladder? Public restrooms will no longer be an immutable part of our human condition. He mentions also that, this is where we are likely to run into some of the limitations, right? There's limitations of data, speed of the physical world, for example, for the experiments, and the intrinsic complexity. Of course, the human constraints also play a role, for example, when clinical trials are involved. He mentioned that experiments on cells, animals, and various chemical processes, like, for example, drug discovery, etc., they're limited by the speed of the physical world. Culturing bacteria or other cells sometimes takes time, or simply just waiting for chemical reactions to occur, with no obvious way to speed it up. What's interesting here is we've had some examples of reproducing the entire certain species of worms in a simulation. So to me, here the big question is, can we simulate certain things with 100% accuracy? Certainly the idea that AlphaFold can predict the 3D structures of certain proteins maybe points to the fact that, maybe we can have near 100% accurate simulations of biology. He mentioned this here. He's saying even massive quantitative molecular data, like the proteomics data that I collected while working on mass spectrometry techniques, is noisy and misses a lot. So proteomics is the study of proteins, similar to how genomics is the study of genes. But this is in fact where we're seeing some massive breakthroughs with AlphaFold, with AI models able to predict some things, to notice some patterns in the folding of these proteins that we have not been able to find before. of classical computing with our own human brains. When talking about, for example, producing certain drugs and seeing how it interacts on the human system, for example, not only does it take time to just run the actual experiments on humans, there's tons of bureaucracy, regulatory requirements, etc., that, in his opinion and many others, add unnecessary additional time and delay progress. This is why many people are skeptical of the value of AI. Oh, and here we come to AlphaFold. Some of the skepticism has been reduced by major and revolutionary breakthroughs like AlphaFold, which of course is won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. So this was either written or this particular part was added very recently. And Alpha Proteo, which is another very recent sort of publication by Google DeepMind, where a sort of offspring of AlphaFold, if you will, is able to create proteins that attach themselves to target molecules. So for example, a protein binding site that attaches to a protein that plays a role in cancer or certain viruses or certain autoimmune diseases, that almost allows us to have a little bit more control over the protein. This, as the researchers at Google DeepMind put it, this allows us to design proteins or create designer proteins. We're getting to the point where we can engineer the building blocks of life. He's saying that a common formulation is AI can do a better job analyzing your data, but it can't produce more data or improve the quality of the data. Garbage in, garbage out. By the way, AlphaFold has predicted over 200 million protein structures, nearly all cataloged proteins known to science. Another Google DeepMind project called GNOME has discovered new structures of materials such as crystals, materials that could power future technologies. To give you an understanding of how that compares to how many materials we've been able to discover, this dark blue circle, that's human experimentation. We were able to uncover 20,000 sort of new materials that are computationally stable. Using other computational methods, we did a total of 48,000. Go humans! But this big circle here, that's GNOME, which expanded the number of stable materials currently known to humanity to 421,000. Then those sort of recipes are given to this little robot that's sitting inside of this glass blast-proof cage as it tries to cook up those sort of theoretical material recipes to see if we're able to reproduce it. But here Dario continues, he's saying that this idea of garbage in, garbage out, AI can't help, is pessimistic, and it's thinking about AI in the wrong way. AI is not a method of data analysis, but a virtual biologist who performs all the tasks biologists do, including designing and running experiments in the real world by controlling lab robots or simply telling humans which experiments to run. It is by speeding up the whole research process that AI can truly accelerate biology. Again, this little circle is what humans can do. This is what we can do with various computational methods. And then we get an AI model that dreams up these new recipes, right? As it comes off the candidates, graphs it, see which one has stability. Then this robot, again, guided by an AI system that sits there and takes the little chemicals and heats them up and uses a centrifuge, whatever it does, to produce those chemicals, to test, to see if it can synthesize those new materials, right? So it successfully synthesized more than 41 new materials, opening up new possibilities for AI-driven material synthesis. So again, this is not 10 years in the future. This is not science fiction. It's happening now. In fact, this post is from last year. So actually it's happening, last year. Dario continues, I want to repeat this because it's the most common misconception that comes up when I talk about AI's ability to transform biology. I am not talking about AI as merely a tool to analyze data. He's talking about AI to perform, direct, and improve upon nearly everything biologists do. If you've heard of the Pareto principle or the 80-20 principle, where 80% of the results is often attributed to 20% of the inputs, it's the idea that not all inputs are the same. Usually a small number of the things that you do contribute to some big impacts. And it's the same thing here in the progress in biology, that a surprisingly large fraction of the progress in biology has come from a truly tiny number of discoveries. There's maybe around one of these major discoveries per year, but collectively they arguably drive over half of the progress in biology. And these discoveries are powerful precisely because they cut through intrinsic complexity and data limitations, directly increasing our understanding and control over biological processes. In other words, these discoveries that kind of are at the foundational level, even though there hasn't been a lot of them, they have a massive impact. He gives some examples such as CRISPR that allows live editing of a gene in our organisms, various microscopes like light microscopes electron microscopes, etc. Genome sequencing and synthesis was dropped in cost. By the way, the cost for gene sequencing has been dropping faster than even, for example, Moore's law for computers, for computer chips. I forget the dates, but I think in the year 2000, it was in the billions. Whereas now recently, I think we've surpassed the $100 genome sequencing. This point in all of this is that this is precisely where AI could really help, because it would increase by 10x or more if there's a lot more talented creative researchers. That would increase the rate of discovery. In other words, what he's saying is the returns to intelligence are high for these discoveries. More smart people doing foundational biology work, the return on that intelligence is very, very high. By the way, recently, one of the developers, the founders of CRISPR, did an interview basically saying that one of the limitations they have is that I apologize if I'm getting the details wrong, but the Cas9 protein, or one of the proteins they use for modifying genes, is a little bit too big. And if it was smaller, it would be much easier to accurately do some of the gene editing. And again, this is somewhere where you'd think something like AlphaFold from DeepMind or AlphaProteo, where they might be able to come up with a solution for this protein that has the same functionality, but just much, much smaller, potentially could unlock a massive breakthrough in our ability to accurately and safely edit genes. Now, take that with a grain of salt. That's not my area of expertise, but from the people that I've talked to in that area, it seems like it could be realistic. So his greater point here is that powerful AI could 10x the rate of these discoveries, these foundational discoveries in biology, giving us the next 50 to 100 years of biological progress in just 5 to 10 years. And the reason why we can't get 100x is because, of the time that these experiments take, designing advanced microscopes, expensive lab facilities, etc. But again, he's noting here that intelligence could, over time, drop those bottlenecks to reduce them. So what he says next here is actually kind of interesting. So notice he says he thinks that we could get 1,000 years of progress in 5 to 10 years, but he's very skeptical that we can get 100 years in 1 year. He also mentions that, even more optimistically, as he says, it's possible that AI-enabled biological science will reduce the need for various clinical trials and experiments by developing better animal and cell experimental models, or even simulations. And this is the thing that I am very excited about. And again, we've seen a few things where we are able to simulate these small, simple organisms. We're able to simulate it with them a lot of accuracy. So with better AI models, with more compute, is it possible that we would be able to, for example, simulate what happens in the human body, the function of all the proteins, the function of all the systems working together? That seems like it would mean that we can run these experiments very fast, instantly. Could we be in one now? Totally kidding, of course. He continues, this will be particularly important in developing drugs against the aging process, which plays out over decades and where we need a faster iteration loop. There's this idea of, in terms of like immortality or negligible senescence, so the idea that we'll get to a point where we age so slowly as to be barely perceptible. There's this idea of, I think it's called the escape velocity, where basically if you're 30 now, and currently the life expectancy is 74, well, what if our life expectancy increases faster than you age, right? So for every 1 year that passes, these new AI models, new discoveries, new breakthroughs kind of increase our life expectancy by 2 years. And maybe it won't start that way. Maybe every year that you age, you will only increase it in the beginning by half a year, but over time it'll exceed, the flow of time and improve, at which point you would kind of be effectively immortal, or at least you won't die from aging. You can still get hit by a bus or whatnot, but slowly falling into senescence won't be the way that most of us go. So in summary, he's saying that these AI-enabled systems will have a compressed 21st century. So once a powerful AI is developed, we will in a few years make all the progress in biology and medicine that we would have made in the whole 21st century. So 100 years of progress in a few years. Again, keep in mind that could potentially kick off in the 2030s. This is why so many of us in the AI space say kind of the slogan, don't die. Because if we do indeed see, 100 years of improvements in biology, of discovery, if we'll see that, let's say, in 10 years, can you imagine how silly you would feel if you did something foolish, took a certain risk, and cut your life short now? I'll give you a quick example. I recently visited a few family members who convinced me to test out a dirt bike. Not wanting to disappoint them, I did. And this is me riding that dirt bike, and I look pretty cool, don't I? What you don't see is the following day when I wiped out and landed pretty hard in the dirt. As I lied there looking up at the sky, all I can think was, do not do that again. The risk to reward of riding dirt bikes was never that good. But now the opportunity cost of, checking out earlier than you normally would have, that opportunity cost potentially is now much, much more massive. So I've cut all communications with that side of the family. On another note, if they figure out how to fix ADHD, I wonder if that would make my channel better or worse. Dario continues to make a list of what we might expect. So reliable prevention and treatment of nearly all natural infectious disease. Certainly, I think Google DeepMind and researchers from there, based on what Alpha Proteo was researching, this seems very likely, or at least they seem to think like this is a very powerful and likely application of this technology. Elimination of most cancer. So again, in the Alpha Proteo, for example, they've targeted autoimmune cancer and various viral diseases. I think that was like one of the main focuses. Dario continues that AI will likely be also possibly create treatment regimens that are finely adapted to the individualized genome of the cancer. Effective prevention, effective cures for genetic disease. Companies like Illumina provide embryo screening, making it possible to prevent genetic disease. Potentially in the future, we'd be able to test for cancers with a blood draw, which of course would make it much easier to have preventative care. I mean, if you can do a whole body cancer scan from basically a blood vial from drawing your blood, certainly a lot more people would do it more often. Improve treatments of most other ailments, biological freedom. They're talking about fertility, birth control, management of weight. Ozempic and the semaglutides, I think, did quite a lot in this field, but certainly there probably could be more. I'd be curious to know if everybody could sort of change their physical appearance. Would we all look different, or would we all kind of approach some one sort of idealized appearance that we want to look like? The idea of doubling of the human lifespan. Interestingly, he brings up escape velocity. Once human lifespan is 150, we may be able to reach escape velocity, buying enough time that most of those currently alive today will be able to live as long as they want. Although there's certainly no guarantee this is biologically possible. And this is what I mean. If some sort of a biological immortality is possible and possible within our lifetimes, is it smart to go dirt biking with your teenage relatives because you're old and you want to seem cool in front of them? The answer is no, Wes, it is not. It is not smart. It is worth looking at this list and reflecting on how different the world will be if all of it is achieved 7 to 12 years from now, which is in line with this aggressive AI timeline. It goes without saying this would be an unimaginable humanitarian triumph. Elimination all at once of the most of the scourges that have haunted humanity for millennia. Next, we mentioned neuroscience and mind. So in the previous section, it was about the physical diseases, but let's cover the neuroscience or mental health. And mental health seems to be quite an important topic nowadays, and not just mental health, but also this idea of being neurotypical versus, not neurotypical, or as Dave Shapiro puts it, neurospicy, which I gotta say, I like the sound of that. Are you, dear listener, are you neurotypical or neurospicy? Let me know. Dario continues that hundreds of millions of people have a very low quality of life due to problems like addiction, depression, low functioning autism, PTSD, psychopathy, or intellectual disabilities. And of course, billions or more struggle with everyday problems that can often be interpreted as much milder versions of these severe clinical disorders. Certainly, PTSD and depression can have a massive impact on your life, but even if it's your garden variety anxiety, for example, that can certainly steal a lot of your joy, even if you live in great circumstances. Have you ever been miserable and have no rational explanation for it, like everything's good, but just the thing in my brain that's supposed to make the happy juice isn't working? And he's saying it may be possible to go beyond addressing problems to improving the baseline quality of the human experience. All the principles that he laid out in biology equally apply to neuroscience. The field is also propelled forward by a small number of discoveries, often related to tools for measurement or precise intervention. He points out that the progress in the 20th century neuroscience was enormous. For example, we didn't even understand how or why neurons fired until the 1950s. Interestingly, and I talk about this quite a bit in my videos, he's saying there's one thing we should add to this basic picture, which is that some of the things we've learned about AI itself, these are likely to help advance neuroscience. Since the AI neural nets, they're sort of modeled after the human brain, the neural nets of the human brain. I feel like looking how the AI works gives us a very new and a very interesting picture into how the human brain works. He continues, interpretability is an obvious example. Although biological neurons superficially operate in a completely different manner from artificial neurons, a lot of the basic questions, they're the same, right? How do these simple units, how do they do these operations that work together to perform these important computations? And I feel like we might have to come back to this little piece because I don't think I knew about this. He's saying, as one example, a computational mechanism discovered by interpretability researchers in AI systems was recently rediscovered in the brains of mice. So meaning we figured out something about the way these AI systems worked, a certain computational mechanism. Then we looked into the brains of mice and lo and behold, biological brains seemingly worked in much the same fashion. I didn't read this yet, so I am sort of guessing, but here's what he linked to. So again, I haven't read this yet, so I don't know what it's about. This is that paper that he's linking to, so I'll link it below if you want to read it. But I think the big point is that there might be some sort of similarities about artificial neural networks and ones that we have in our brains, as well as biological life. As the paper starts, a defining characteristic of intelligent systems, right, whether natural or artificial, so mice or men or ChatGPT or Anthropic, is the ability to generalize, basically to make intelligent decisions about what our different senses are picking up, whether that's through our eyes or smell, hear, touch, etc., even though in their environment there are significant variations. And Dario continues, it is much easier to do experiments on artificial neural networks than on real ones. So interpretability may well become a tool for improving our understanding of neuroscience. Plus, powerful AIs will themselves probably be able to develop and apply this tool better than humans can. So this is what he expects AI to accomplish in neuroscience. Again, the timescale he's talking about is if, for example, in 2026 we achieve powerful AI, then we're talking 5 to 10 years after that. And he's talking about, drugs for molecular biology, chemistry, and genetics. So, for example, there are various drugs that change our neurotransmitters, so kind of the chemistry in our brain, to alter brain function. It affects alertness or perception. It can change your mood, etc. AI can help us invent many, many more. Improvement in the neural measurements and intervention. If we can see what the various neuronal circuits are doing, maybe we can intervene to change their behavior. Advanced computational neuroscience. We might be able to uncover the real causes of very complex diseases like psychosis or mood disorders. Behavioral interventions. So if you think of a psychologist, potentially AI could accelerate the effectiveness of those methods, but also help patients to adhere to existing methods. So an idea of an AI coach who always helps you be the best version of yourself, who studies your interactions and helps you learn to be more effective. This seems very promising, and indeed it is. For example, if you at my age decide to climb on a dirt bike, it can, let's say, whisper in your ear, your AI coach going, are you sure you're not just doing this to look cool in front of your teenager relatives? This is going to end poorly. Don't do it. So yeah, I would say it does seem very promising. And here's what he believes again. So again, we'll have 100 years of progress in 5 to 10 years after AI kind of gets to a certain level, this powerful AI. And so most mental illnesses can probably be cured. PTSD, for example, in certain populations is a massive, massive plague. For example, here in the US among veterans, PTSD is a big problem that's hard to address, that results in a host of issues that's very difficult to treat and just does not have, in general, really good outcomes. Seems like interest and research in that area is picking up with depression, addiction, and various other mental illnesses. That might not even be the right word for it, but these afflictions. And basically, there's a lot of people that are suffering. And why? Well, the answer is likely to be some combination of something went wrong biochemically, although this could be very complex, but it can also be something went wrong with the neural network at a high level. We covered a paper where a person taught AI neural networks with reinforcement learning to play Pokemon Red. And one thing that jumped out at me is there was a point where the AI agent, the AI trainer, just refused to go near this one building or a particular computer within a building. Like it just avoided it like the plague, even though it needed to go to progress through the game. And it really seemed like some sort of a trauma has occurred to where this AI agent just was scared, deathly scared of going near this building or this computer. And the person that was training it, the engineer behind it, realized that the computer allowed the Pokemon trainer to deposit their Pokemon for storage, but how the reward function was written was that basically it got rewarded for the levels, the combined levels of the Pokemon going up. And so when it deposited the Pokemon, it took a massive reduction to the Pokemon levels. It's not that they disappeared, it just deposited them. So sort of on paper, it seemed like it was a massive loss. And so the AI neural network interpreted this as a huge catastrophic negative thing and refused to go anywhere near that computer. Interestingly, this is kind of how our brains sometimes work as well. Something happens during our formative years. Maybe it's even not that big of a deal, but our brain really creates some really negative response to it, creates some meaning to it that is just not that advantageous to us, that results in various phobias. In this AI training, the engineer that was writing it simply had to rewrite the reward function a little bit. Magically, the AI was healed and was able to go on with its life to continue progressing as if nothing ever happened. Could there be similar, analogous sort of things we could do with the human brain? If something went wrong biochemically, right, could we just fix it with some simple drug or therapy? Or if something went wrong with the neural network that caused a trauma, that caused psychosis or something like that, PTSD or depression or addiction, could we just like nudge that a little bit to rewrite it? Maybe. I'm hopeful. And as Dario says, tools for measurement and intervention, especially in live humans, seem likely to lead to rapid iteration and progress. He also mentions everyday problems that we don't think of as clinical disease will also be solved. Most of us have everyday psychological problems that are not ordinarily thought of as rising to the level of clinical disease. Some people are quick to anger. Others have trouble focusing or are often drowsy. Some are fearful or anxious, or react badly to change, or perhaps D, all of the above. And he continues, today, drugs already exist to help with that. He says, for example, alertness or focus. We have things like caffeine, modafinil, and Ritalin. I feel like he's missing one. But as with many other previous areas, much more is likely to be possible. Probably many more such drugs exist or have not been discovered, or there might be entirely new modalities such as targeted light stimulation or magnetic fields. Interestingly, Tim Ferriss recently has been talking about some sort of a maybe magnetic stimulation. I'm not sure. And he's saying that he's seeing an incredible benefit for depression with that. He's been, I believe, funding a lot of research into depression and PTSD and various other afflictions of this sort. I totally said that wrong. I apologize. He's talking about the transcranial magnetic stimulation. I'm not recommending it one way or another. I'm just saying that certainly we are seeing progress. We're seeing new modalities, new treatments. What happens if we get 100 years of progress in the next, 10, 15 years? It will help us tune our cognitive function and emotional states. Would you like to be smarter and happier? I think most people would. He's saying he's very optimistic about the compressed 21st centuries, the accelerated progress where everyone can get their brain to behave a bit better and have a more fulfilling day-to-day experience. It's interesting how you can sometimes tell by their writing, the people that have had problems with some mental health in the past that struggle with it. Something about this little saying, they can get their brain to behave a bit better, to me suggests that this man knows what he's talking about. Again, he reiterates that human baseline experience can be much better. What if you could have creative inspiration, compassion, fulfillment, transcendence, love, beauty, or meditative peace? We might have different experiences of these, different biological set points. These can differ greatly from person to person, and of course within the same person at different times, or can be triggered by various drugs, some with side effects. What if you had more control over it? What if you had the biological freedom to choose, or at least maybe control to some degree some of these things? Next, we look at the economic development and poverty. And this is where he asks the question, will everyone have access to these technologies, right? If we're all, buff and beautiful and smart and happy and are going to live forever, that's nice, but is that going to be available to the top 1% of the world, to the top 10, top 50, or everyone? Now, the rest of this essay dives into some topics that I wanted to cover in a different video, in part because they are linked to some of the conversations that we've had about UBI, world governance, and meaning, right? If nobody needs to have a job, what are we all going to do? How are we going to find meaning, etc.? So we will cover this in a different video, but for the time being, I do want to ask you about what you thought about the first two, and that is biology and physical health, right? Imagine this sort of escape velocity in which the scientific progress makes us live longer and longer. Eventually, our expected lifespan is increasing faster than a 1-to-1 ratio. You're aging slower than improvement in how long you have to live. I mean, that's effective biological immortality. Again, you can still get hit by a bus or be foolish enough to go ride dirt bikes with your teenage family members. But in terms of aging, your aging will be not really noticeable. Negligible senescence, as they say, right? You stay at your peak shape, your peak youthfulness, You stay there for most of your lifespan. And of course, if you're miserable, you would hate that. But what if we also solved the whole mental health aspect of it? What if you woke up every day feeling good? Physically, but also mentally. What if you woke up with a smile on your face and a zest for life, if you will? So by Dario's estimate, that could be as early as 2031, right? So 6 to 7 years from now, we could see the beginning of this progress. Assume for a second that this is true. How important does it become to you personally that we get this AI thing right? Not only that we achieve this level, but also that it's distributed, right? It's not just in the hands of the few, the people that built it, but it's distributed to the rest of us. How important is it that it's affordable, that it's accessible? If we can have it as early as 2031, how important is it that we don't let, maybe let's say the people that don't want it out there, if they are able to delay it 10, 20 years, how important is it that that doesn't happen, that in fact it gets here, within the next 5 to 10 years, maybe 15 years, as opposed to, let's say, 50 years? I don't know about you, but I would hate to die just as this flywheel is spinning up. Can you imagine if for all of human history we had, disease and pain and mental illness and all this horrible stuff we had to deal with, and then there's a sort of a line at which, there's a lot less, that we're able to eliminate a lot of it, where we're able to stay young and healthy and happy for as long as we care to. And then imagine dying here. I don't know about you, but to me, bummed would not even come close to describing how I feel about that. Anyways, make sure you're subscribed. We're covering the rest of this in a different video. And we're also going to talk about the economic forces that are driving some of this, or will be, once automation, all that stuff starts taking over. If you made this far, my name is Wes Roth. Thank you so much for watching. And I'll see you in the next one.